Okay, I'm going to try again. So, okay, so one of the reasons is Cape Town, South Africa, and the other reason is Munch. And this was always one of my favorite. The first time I was ever in Oslo, I bought this book of lithographs of Munch, of Alpha and Omega, and it's a satirical love poem. And maybe you all know it. If you don't, you should read it. It's very beautiful. And although it is not one of his paintings, the way he describes her feels just like a painting when he says, Omega's eyes would change, and on ordinary days they were pale blue, but when she looked at her lovers, they became black, with flecks of carmine, and occasionally she covered her mouth with a flower. So, okay, next image. Um, I never use actually metaphors of food for painting. I thought it was a bit disgusting when I had the title, an appetite for painting. But so we found, and Gavin also said, don't speak about your own work. But in South Africa, I also studied ethics, and the professor always said, you cannot talk about freedom or a word like that in an abstract way only. You always talk of somebody's notion of freedom. So when I speak about my own work, I also always relate it to other artists' work. So for me, it is natural. For me, painting is also a dialogue with other painters. So I always relate my work to other works. But I also wanted to say, as our Russian friend made a big difference between conceptual and visual art, I think that the two is very much got to do with one another. I mean, Vincent van Gogh, to take a classic hero of all painters almost, he wrote beautiful letters to his brother, explaining what he was trying to do and with the colors. And so I don't think you can only paint with a hand without a head. And a head without a hand can also, or with some physical aspects, can also not happen, because whatever form, as a former speaker says, it takes, in the end you do, it's like a human being, you're always struggling with the metaphysical and the physical. And painting is very much to do with that, because I paint indeed, but I don't actually like paint very much. I know very little about technique and craft and all those things. At art school, when they asked us in our first year, why do you think you're here? What do you think art is? Art is, I found it a very difficult question, and I thought the most honest answer is that I want to make marks. I, um, I actually started out much more as someone who wanted to, that's why I like graffiti art, also the fact of you want to feel that you are alive, that you have existed, that you are here. Here I was cutting up also my my canvases, and this is one of the few works I think that's got the word food, uh, alluding to foods. Breakfast for Klaus Oldenburg. She had the other work with the egg in it. Here you see I thought I would like to be a writer. Unlike Adrian, who is a better writer than me, I wanted to not really be a painter. I wanted to be a writer and be wise. But I found out that also with languages, it's too long. I only read in fragments. And also my lecture is fragments. I forget things, I forget the dates, and I have to see them again. And this was also an art work, or a work that at art school, it was, as you can see, it was a book that I found on the street, and a car had driven over it. And so, and here, also, what I wanted to say, which is different from the previous speaker, although I have a love for material, um, I am an artist that eventually did get back to the image. I found it difficult to do, but as a child, I always drew figures. But wanting to, at a certain stage, make art, I thought, what must I do with this figure? And even now, painting is for me a constant struggle between the physical, the gestural, the material, and actually getting rid of it all. I was a big lover of abstract expressionists, but indeed there were so many bad konings all around that I was a bad Rauschenberg, I was a bad koning, and I'm a woman, so I thought, maybe I should use the things that women are supposed to be busy with, like love stories, like being second base, or etc., and make that into positive things. This was the first time I used the portrait, in which often the portrait also stands in for something else. I, at art school, found all the artists very boring. No, sorry, not all the artists, that's a Freudian slip. All the painters. So I fell in love with the photography lecturer because he was the sexiest. But I never painted him, I painted his girlfriend. But she was then studying with Joseph Beuys, so she wasn't there. But anyway, but you see here again that in a sense there's a destruction of the surface and there is the image. Okay. At the time I thought in Holland, came to Holland in 76, and for the first years I did not paint at all. I mostly used collages. And and so figures appeared in the fragments of the collage. This was called couples. And at a certain stage, I thought maybe all my work is busy with the tensions between things. Okay. Only 10 years later, almost, or how many years later, in 84, I started to use painting again. Also, something I have to say that I always thought in South Africa, especially when I was at the dentist, I would think if you would get locked up in solitary confinement or in prison, what would be the most simple thing that you could still make an artwork with? And I thought a pencil. So in a sense, I always would have liked a pencil more than paint. But paint is wonderful, okay? Okay, then in Holland, oh yeah, from the first time I had a solo exhibition, I always contextualize myself in the sense I always wrote my own press release, not because I, as I say, could write so much better than anyone else, but because I wanted to say what I thought I was doing and not have someone else always tell you first, which does not mean that I don't want to hear what someone else is saying. But anyway, most of the time, I defined myself in the negative. So still, I am very interested in all the problems that painting get into, all the bad things. I mean, but then there was the artist, Rene Daniels. This is one of his works. This is beautiful work. Can't see it. That's the other reason I think that paintings doesn't do it so well at biennales, because a painting needs time to be looked at. And in a biennale, in those big shows, I mean, I see myself, you walk like this, you have a different span of concentration. And the painting needs time, and all paintings reproduce badly. I used to think, that's nonsense, but it is true. The older you get, yeah, me and him, as you say, 60, when you're 60, you start to realize things that you didn't when you were younger. In South Africa, I thought I only liked Picasso. I didn't like Matisse because I could only see his type of woman, but I could not see the color because painterly colors anyway, you can't reproduce them well. But anyway, so this painter, Rene Daniels, um, he showed me, while I put the emphasis on the negative side of things, I would say I paint because I'm frustrated, or he put it on the positive side. He said you cannot make a good painting without love. You have to, in a sense, love your subject matter, or at least, so in a sense, painting is always a positive act, because if you're really totally in tears, you cannot paint. So he was very important for me. And also because you had all the Germans, not against them, but they were, you had your Kiefers and you had your Basilices. And I appreciated that, but it was all the very thick paint, the big gestures. And as I said, it was new. Rene Daniels in Holland was new for me. And then came this, he's 5 years younger than I'm, what's his name? Luc Thomas. Here comes this Belgian. And this was the first painting I ever saw of him. And it was called Disenchantment. And I did not really understand immediately his way, especially then he used different ways of painting, and they were small. So again, the scale was very important. Suddenly this painter with tackling all these heavy subject matter, which was not really dealt with. When the supposed new figuration started, it was so much in this new expressionistic way of painting that you did not really see a nude, you did not really see a portrait or an historical subject matter. As Jeff Wall in those days sort of spoke about the fact, he would almost do it for the painters. I mean, he didn't say it like that, but, we weren't doing it. Then the other artists would take on the subject matter. What's interesting, at a certain stage, Luke's influence was very big, and this article came out. Now, I've heard that, I don't know the person who wrote it. I hear that he also paints, but I do know that for example, one of the artists in this article, Sasno, and Luke spoke about it recently. There's a new book of writings on and by Luke Thomas that just came out, as you said, this previous weekend. And they both said, oh no, terrible article, and now the work's good, you should not, painters should not be compared like that. I disagree. I mean, I compare all the time in the sense of I love to read what other artists say, because you say if someone else can articulate what they are doing, then I understand a bit better what I don't do or try to do. Okay. Talking about material, this is how my paint looks in my studio. Very dirty. And so I, I've always thought maybe I should change, and have all the, when I was in here's Luke. It's not a good photograph, but talking about differences and similarities, um, I never thought he would have such a clean palette. But there you see, I'm the girl, he's the boy, but he's got the clean palette, and I've got the dirty palette. Um, yeah, and then the thing about using images, um, I the other problem with painting is that I also put this in when I still thought Mr. Storr would be here, as you say, because, but that's another long story. But what is interesting about this series of among other things, of Richter is that he did not only make one painting of Bada he actually made a whole series, three of her different sizes, but a whole room. And I have found um, that a difficulty of painting, that the single work, um, if you don't have a context, the, I was once years ago in a biennale in Sydney, and I had never had anyone writing about me in a different country in a newspaper. And someone said, "Oh, you are mentioned." And I thought, "Oh, I'm mentioned." And then the person, the critic says, "This work is worse than mediocre." And only the titles maybe is interesting. Um, but at that stage, you know, the thing um, of paintings relating to other paintings, because yeah, I I deliberately used the same source as Richter, because that's something that also interests me a lot about when we talk about what does a painting mean. People often talk only about the source that is used, but because a painting is made differently. Um, Someone once asked me, you know, could I mean, one does imitate yourself. I know that is terrible. It's difficult to always treat something so fresh that you don't repeat yourself. Um, on the one hand, I take these images that is from our times. I mean, I do it myself, that I take these images that is filled with a lot of um, problems and you could say sensationalism because they are. And at the same time, I still think that the painting, the tension between the source and how it is done is very much how does the energy of the actual making, you know, the painting is for me a very physical act, as I say. It is made up of not how you say how quick, or so, some things are done very fast and some things are done very slow. So in that sense, a painting is made up of all kinds of energies coming together. I just want to say here you have same source, two different paintings of the same image. I never work with real models, so because I always use images that are already flat to a certain degree, and that so my portraits, if you want to call them portraits, are in a sense also imaginary figures because I mean, I never know my models in the real in that sense. Although there's always exceptions. I have used my daughter a lot, but that's not what we, okay. Um, yeah, this, I was going to tell a whole long story. This is related to the Richter about how, you know, in this exhibition, the the Jesus images and well, the men with beards, they were all in one room together. So it's very important the context in which a painting is put, okay? Yeah, this, I'm not quite sure what I was going to say about that anymore, but that is also this little painting of mine. This small painting has often been, you know, then I've been in a show and then there's no place to put it, and then we go and make an intervention and put it somewhere else. So there's a whole story on the different, how it also changes in all the different places that it's put. Okay, I just want to say, someone I'm really jealous of, that I really like, is Andy Warhol. And the piss painting is the one thing that all three of us have mentioned. Because what I really like about Warhol is not all the stories about his relation to money and all of that stuff. That's not so interesting, but that in a way, he has always, without being a political artist in this sense of, okay, now I'm going to make this type of political statement. His work in itself, I remember it was a documentary, and there was all these abstract paintings, and then you had the piss paintings of Warhol. Um, and you have his electric chair. I mean, in a way, and he yeah, and he's not even really a proper painter. As Alex Katz explained, why not? And so he's much more a graphic artist, maybe, but it doesn't matter. I think among painters, there's the painters, and there's the clowns. I mean, I like Jeff Koons. I mean, and all the painters hates him, and he isn't really a painter at all. But he always have good texts. Like last text I read of Koons, he said, "The gesture is the medium." Sorry, the message. You had the medium is the message. And now he was saying the gesture. And then he says, yeah, he knows he's making fake gestures, but it's not only about, this type of gesture. What it's really about is the attitude, the gesture as a whole. And he's right. I mean, okay. Oh, yeah. I use this to say something about beauty because the one thing, if you have written a lot and if you grow old and you have to look back at all the things that you've said, sometimes they don't apply in the same way, or because when I was busy dealing with source material like fashion models and naked women, I said you cannot not talk about the notion of beauty. But I don't, I'm not really busy with beauty in that sense at all. But what is interesting, for example, this modern painters once asked me if they could use a painting of mine on their cover. And I said I wanted to use this painting of my artist friend Mushekwa that I made. And they said, can I have the other? And they said, no, we were really much more thinking of this painting of Naomi Campbell, because they actually, indeed, think this painting is more beautiful than the other painting, which just shows you that beauty in painting is not at all the same as beauty in fashion. I think the Moshe was a better painting than the Naomi Campbell painting. But okay, that we all have to go and see it in the real and discuss. It's difficult to talk about visual art without having a visual thing. Okay, I have to hurry up, but I do have to say all the things people do to painting. For example, um, I was never in Mr. Saatchi's collection, but when he wanted to make the show on painting, he bought some paintings on auctions and so, and then you're in a group show, and the group show gets this terrible title, The Triumph of Painting, and if I had a choice, if I was us, then I would say, I don't want to be in a show called The Triumph of Painting, Leni Riefenstahl, the Triumph of the Will, and I don't like to see painting in that way. Ooh, here comes this thing and it triumphs, terrible. But and apart from the fact that after that show, he also got rid of all the works that he bought to put in the show, and. And I was on the cover, but not on the hard cover. I was on the cover that you can throw away, that covers the hard cover. But yeah, well, one should know of a man like that. But I had not. The thing that I find sometimes is it would be nice if painters or artists in general have a bit more power, because, for example, oh yeah, now we're at the art fairs. Oh yeah, yeah. You see, that is another thing. Never mind Mr. Saatchi. If a work of yours, again, gets out of context, yeah, I don't think I have to say very much about this. Again, we can have a whole discussion just about this image, but yeah, well, I just want to say one thing about Mr. Sachi, that context about the power that you have as an artist when you let something go, when it's not yours anymore, when it's in your studio, when you work with it, it's still part of your whole philosophy, your physical space. But when it leaves, when it gets sold, it's you lose a lot of things about it. Because once I wanted to make a little. Oh, oh, you have to, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, I'll drop the Saatchi thing, but I just want to say that I wanted to make a picture of my own work. Then my mother was still alive, it's a long time ago, and I wanted to show her, look, I'm hanging in this gallery, and this guy came up to me, this young, sexy guy, and he said, you're not allowed to take pictures here. I said, I'm the artist. And he said, no, you're not the artist. I said, yeah, because I'm used to carrying my passport with me. Comes from the old days, so I always have my passport. I said, look, I'm the artist. And the guy said, whoa. Well, even if you are the artist, this work does not belong to you anymore. So, and it's a funny story, but indeed, it has got lots of repercussions. And just to get back to Cézanne, when I was at art school, I, as I say, I also didn't like Cézanne. And specifically this painting, they told us, don't look at photographs, don't use photographs because, see, look at that long arm. But as a young kid, I thought it was extremely boring. I wanted something else. And I also only started to appreciate Cézanne when I saw him it was an exhibition on landscape, and it showed all the other artists of that period, and they all looked very dull. And from far away, I saw this bright green, and I thought, who's that? And it was Cézanne. So if you have a boring art teacher and they hammer on the wrong things because they kept on saying Cézanne is the circle and the geometry, and I could not, that didn't do it for me. Anyway, also, this thing about value and context, it says that, it was stolen, and after 4 years, they found this Cézanne in Serbia. That's, and I'm a big old Picasso fan, but here's another context. Museum director in Charles Escher in Eindhoven. Yeah, he made a project in which he, for the first time, got Picasso to go to Gaza. So this is the Picasso exhibited in Gaza. And I had thought, it's a nice thing that he did it, but then a Palestinian artist spoke to me about that later, and she was very upset and thought it was a very paternalistic, wrong thing to do or whatever. So, but anyway, here, oh yeah, polka. I got to really hurry up now. Just want to say also this: I have often made jokes about male artists and female artists, but I like men. I don't have no problem with the male artists, and sometimes they are much sweeter than the woman. I mean, because here you have this polka, and look, and he made this playful, yeah, thing on top of the sexual imagery. Okay. And here you have a drawing of mine, which I think is very funny, because, but anyway. So this is very funny and very sweet. So another artist, as I say, who is totally different from Luc Tuymans or me, that could get a bit heavy, and my drawings are funnier than my paintings. The first time I saw a Chris O'Feely exhibition, I thought, how nice. Because that's a lovely thing about painting, but about all art, just as you think something cannot be done, someone comes and proves to you that it can. And that's wonderful because, we've learned illustration is bad, decoration is bad. You know, that's no art. And here comes Ufili, and he makes these paintings, and they're filled with pleasure, filled with sex, filled with jokes, and lovely. And I heard, you know, in here you have Michael Jordan. Oh yeah, that's too long a story. Okay, I'll tell you that later. Okay, this is just about writing about art. This was one of my books. So if I write better than I speak, I mean, because then it's quiet, and then you can read, you know, what I've said about painting. Just want to say this to end off. This is a lovely catalog because the way he made an ABC of all the influences that influenced him in his paintings. And they're lovely. You have Muhammad Ali, you have the Bible, you have God. There's nothing, you know, God you don't paint. Anyway, but are we ready for the last thing? I just wanted to say, talking about progress, there is no progress in art. There is differences, but no real progress. Why? Otherwise, Velasquez, Goya, and these people would not be as relevant. They stay relevant. So in that sense, it's not a linear progress. It goes like this, and we spoke in a symposium on painting 16 years ago, and in the end, we didn't get anywhere either. But he spoke very well, and seeing that I'm not Chrysophili, and I brought him to you.